biodiversity since 1970. And this is really important. I mean, you might think, well, really, does it matter? It does matter, especially for things like pollinators, who are critical for crop growth. We've, to some extent, built our prosperity on pesticides and insecticides and agrochemicals. This is a map of the world showing the areas that are most at risk of pesticide pollution. And you can see that Ghana certainly doesn't escape. All of Ghana is covered in pesticide residue. In fact, all of the world is, with the exception of places that are not very heavily populated at all, like the Sahara and northern Canada and Greenland and northern Russia. But anywhere there are humans, we have managed to spread pesticides and insecticides on the land. So, so the concept then that's broken out over the last few years is of what's called planetary health. And this has been particularly championed by the Lancet. And planetary health takes a different approach. So there's your single individual health. There's public health, which is the health of groups of people. There's global health, which looks at communities of people. One health, which includes the animal kingdom. And then planetary health, which takes a really holistic view of it, that we have to reestablish our balance with nature and stop exploiting it, because unless we have a healthy planet, we can't have healthy humans. So let's leave that part and move on to climate. So I hope it's clear enough so far. The basic messages are, we haven't been around for so long, but we've certainly put our imprint on the planet, and we are producing massive amounts of greenhouse gases, which are warming the Earth. So let's have a look at where the warming is going on and what it might mean. This graph up here is the mean temperature change in the different parts of the world at 1.5 degrees of global mean surface temperature warming. And this is from the IPCC graph from the United Nations. The lighter the color, the less the temperature. The darker the color, the greater the temperature. So the first thing you can see, that at a global mean of 1.5, and that's just the average, not every place warms up to the same extent. Some are more than others. And it's even more marked at 2 degrees. So what can you see here at 2 degrees? Well, the first thing I guess you can see is that the oceans are warming less than the land. So although the whole world may be at 1.5 or 2 degrees, parts of the land surface are going to be much hotter than that. So when people talk about global warming of 1.5 degrees, that's not what it means for your country or mine. That means the whole world, including the oceans, but the land surfaces could be much hotter. So if you look at this map, you can see that the Arctic is warming faster than any place else. Ghana is warming up quite considerably and uniformly. And of course, that has implications for rainfall. So when the atmosphere warms, it changes the amount of water which the air can hold, and it changes the pattern of rainfall, which is pretty fundamental to human life and growth of crops. So if we look at this graph, which is of changes in precipitation, darker red means less precipitation, darker blue means more precipitation. You can see that there's a band of decreased precipitation spreading across southern United States, Central America, into North Africa, and across the Mediterranean basin. And you've already seen this. I mean, California is on fire as we speak, and it has been with successive droughts. If we go to the southern hemisphere, that band of dryness extends down the coast of Chile. And my friends in Chile, with whom I'm in contact fairly regularly, tell me that it's already a manifest. It extends across to the south and west of Africa and involves Ghana. So Ghana is in line, based on projections, for a warmer, drier temperature. That would be the main message from this. We can dive into these parameters in much greater depth. And there's an interactive atlas which the IPCC makes, and you can click on it and you can look at all of these variables. So we could look at mean temperature or frost days. I don't suppose you have many of those, but we do. Maximum temperature days, which are very important. Days with temperature above 35, total precipitation, maximum precipitation, consecutive dry days, and drought. So it's possible to explore regions quite carefully. But I would say that the resolution up to this point is by no means perfect. So you are lumped into a zone called West Africa. And the computer models and the two physicists who were involved in developing this won the Nobel Prize for this work last week. The computer models are getting more and more sophisticated, but they're not yet able to drill down into, say, northern Ghana. They can give you a projection for the region, but not necessarily down to a local neighborhood, which would require incredible computing. This map is for Ghana, and the variable that we're looking at is warming. And you can see, here's the graph, that it starts to kick off round about now, and there's a gradual increasing upward trend in temperature as the years go on from 2026 to 2056 to 2086. So you would expect that Ghana will become considerably warmer. And if we look at another variable here, which is maximum temperatures, again zoning in on Ghana, these are days with temperatures above 40 degrees centigrade. You can see that northern Ghana, you in Wa, can expect many more days with temperatures above 40 degrees centigrade. So that's something that you can predict and you should start to think about planning for. If we switch over to agricultural and ecological drought, the good news is that Ghana does not come up as a major area of concern. It could happen, but the evidence is most strong for the Mediterranean basin, for the United States, the west coast of South America, and South Africa. But Ghana, good for you, may well avoid an increase in drought. And similarly, if we look at heavy precipitation, however, Ghana, there is a high confidence that you will experience more periods of heavy precipitation. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, what does that mean exactly? And why should I know about that? And what does it have to do with health? And the answer is it has a lot to do with health. And I'll show you that in a moment. Heavy precipitation is one of the major risk factors for enteric infections and hepatitis, as it contaminates surface water. And we'll get into that in a moment. So let's move on to health then. And this is from the WHO report, which was released last week. And so at the bottom here, we have climate change, and then we have three factors which determine your level of vulnerability. So you might want to think now about your local area and how this might apply to you. So the climate's changing, I just showed you that. The vulnerability would be demographic factors. So if, for example, you have a lot of elderly people or young people who are susceptible to heat, that would be a vulnerability. The geography would relate to water, biological factors, socio-political conditions, and most importantly for you, socioeconomic. Do you have enough funds to be able to adapt and mitigate the changes from climate? And then we go over here and look at your health system. How's your leadership? How's your workforce? Is it adequate? Do you have health information systems? Do you have essential medical products, service delivery, and do you have money? So you put those two together and you then look at what you might be hit with, which is extreme weather events, heat stress, you're certainly going to get that. Air quality, Dr. Akatiba and I have chatted a bit about the Hamadan, and that would be an issue for sure. Water quality is an issue, as is food security and vector distribution. So you'd factor all of these things in and you'd come up with a picture of your vulnerability to climate change. And that vulnerability will be manifest in terms of injury from extreme weather events, from heat-related illness, from respiratory illness, from waterborne diseases, zoonoses, vector-borne diseases, malnutrition, non-communicable diseases, mental and psychological health, to name but a few. So you can see how this works. You customize these vulnerability factors and health system capacity and resilience factors and exposure pathways to come up with sort of a vulnerability index. And I have only been to once, but knowing the little that I do about and the resources which you have, I would think you're certainly vulnerable on some of these factors. So we asked in the survey, have you in WA noticed any changes which you feel may be due to a changing climate in your region of northern Ghana? And what you were asked about was increased respiratory infections, an increase in infections, increase in malaria. Trying to get rid of this little bar over here. I'm not sure that I can. I can't quite see behind. Oh, there we go. Increased difficulty in getting clean water, increase in heat effects, and increase in malaria. And these are the answers that you gave as of last night. So I think last night there were 28 replies. At the moment, there are 38 or so. And 22 of the 28 of you yesterday evening said, yes, you have noticed an increase in respiratory illness. 12 of you said you've noticed an increase in intestinal infections. I was really surprised to see that 19 of you have said you've experienced an increase in malnutrition, increased difficulty in getting clean water, again, 20 out of 28, increased heat effects, and an increase in malaria, not so much. And that's interesting, actually, that you're not all reporting that, because what it means is you're not uniformly just clicking yes for everything. You're being selective about it. So that really increases the validity of the answers that you're getting. About half of you think you've seen an increase in malaria, but the others are not so sure. Well, drought, which is a feature of many countries around the world, is associated with an increased risk of infections from a use of water of marginal quality, increased concentrations of pollutants and infections, and reduced flow of water can increase mosquito burden. Drought, of course, also affects nutrition in terms of livestock and crop infections and food prices, and it causes runoff because drought is associated with an increased risk of fires. We mentioned earlier on heavy rainfall, and this is what a domestic sewer system would look like. And normally, runoff water from storms does not mix with the water which we drink. But in heavy rainfall events, that can, and it can lead to contamination of reservoirs and surface water systems. So heavy rainfall has been linked to increased risk of hepatitis A and hepatitis E and enteric infections in countries all around the world, even very wealthy ones. So Vancouver in British Columbia has reported this, as has Melbourne in Australia. One thing that we need to be cognizant of is the issue of food security. And this is a graph of yield in bushels against temperature in degrees Celsius for corn and soybeans. And you can see that as the temperature rises, the yield of crops decreases. So crops are like us. I mean, there's a temperature above which they're not comfortable. And if you crank it up too high, they stop growing. The other thing to remember is that there is evidence that high levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere are associated with decreased nutritional value in the crops which do grow. And so this is one of the major worries with climate change, that we will get smaller amounts of food, and the food that does grow will be of decreased nutritional value. With regard to migration, it's well underway. I mean, I'm not sure about Ghana, who moves into Ghana, but I suspect that there will be, or already is, migration from rural areas to urban areas as people try to get a livelihood, and this will become increasingly complex. With regard to heat, the acute effects of heat are well known. The effects of chronic elevation are not so well known. Obviously, they affect our ability to work and gain an income, and it's linked to wildfires and pollution as well. So that's the story. I mean, now you understand human population growth, how we discovered fossil fuels and how we burnt them and released all of that energy and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and how the carbon dioxide is changing the temperature around us, and how that temperature is changing rainfall distribution and will affect crops and food growth and access to clean water. And now you also know how it impacts on health. So the question is what to do? What can we do about this? And as I was saying to Dr. Akatiba earlier on, I've never spoken to a frontline primary care group like you before, and it's an extraordinary network that you have, and I really need to think about it and talk to him and to Kelly and others a bit more. But in general, there are things that we can all do, either at home or in our hospitals or in our communities, but it's a different dynamic for you. It's maybe easier to talk about the reasons why we haven't done anything. And the science behind climate change has been known since the 1800s. And the United Nations has been publishing reports since 1998. But how come we haven't been involved? Well, it hasn't been seen as a public health issue, but increasingly it is seen as a public health issue. And climate change is thought to be the perfect storm. The psychologists think that humans are simply not programmed to deal with chronic threats, as a result of which we don't react and we just leave it go on. The threats that we are able to deal with are summed up by the mnemonic of pain, P-A-I-N. So we respond to things that are personal, that is, it affects me personally. We respond to things that are abrupt, so they happen immediately, not something that's projected to happen in 10, 20, or 30 years. Things that are immoral or offensive, so they kind of disgust us, and they're happening right now. And climate change doesn't necessarily tick those boxes. COVID ticked those boxes. It was definitely personal because any of us could get it. It happened abruptly. It wasn't really so offensive, but it was disturbing. And it most certainly happened now. So we react to COVID, but we don't react to climate change. Normally, when healthcare providers are asked why they've done nothing about healthcare, about climate change, despite being concerned about it, these are the usual reasons that are given. And it's from this paper here by John Kocher. So people cite a lack of knowledge, that they have other priorities, that they're afraid for their career. I mean, a few years ago, if you got involved in climate change, you were seen as a bit strange and could damage your career. There's a lack of support for it. There's a lack of time. The area is too controversial and you cannot make a change. And people say, well, I'm worried about it, but there's nothing I can do about it. So why would I get involved in this? So we know to an extent what's going to happen. And I think your group can certainly contribute to solutions. And we need to hear your voice. And that's why I'm absolutely thrilled to see so many of you answer that survey, because we look at that data and see how we can translate that into a voice which is one of the voices clamoring for change. And politicians do take notice. I mean, we can tell these stories, and your group in Northern Ghana are in a unique position to be able to tell the world what's happening right on the front lines of a country that's vulnerable to climate change and which has perhaps not the resources to be able to deal with it. So what's the objective? Well, the objective is to get carbon stop putting carbon into the atmosphere by stopping using fossil fuels, remove it, get carbon out of the air, and replant forests and repair the ecosystems. And I know I had a look yesterday evening at deforestation in northern Ghana, and this is a problem. I mean, it is something which you could do, which is try and replant those forests to get some control of the environment in northern Ghana. But I don't think, I mean, obviously the financial incentives are not there for you at the moment. So the main messages from me are that human impact on the earth has been both profound and damaging. And we have triggered changes in global climate and biodiversity, which have profound implications for health. And we need to move urgently now to reduce carbon, remove carbon, and restore damaged ecosystems. And I'm quite certain that your voice is important in that. And I think that we need to have further conversations as to how we can get your voice out and known to the world. So thank you, Dr. Akatiba, and all of the attendees for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you. I hope that that's of some interest and help to you, and look forward to working with you some more, and would be very happy to take any questions. Thanks very much. Dominic, back to you. Dominic, you there? I'm not sure where Dominic is, but I'm sure he'll be back shortly. So,
yeah,
oh, there you are. Okay, Dominic, thanks for that. I hope that's useful. Happy to take any questions or any comments or anything else that you might have.
Yeah, great. That was fantastic, and I learned a couple of things. Sorry, my network dropped just at the tail end of it. So for those of us who have some questions, some comments to make, you could unmute yourself and then ask or make your comments. I've just checked that box that you could be able to unmute yourself. So kindly go ahead to do this if you have a question for Professor Desmond Leddin.
I think everyone's holding back there, Dominic. Are they normally quiet?
Yeah, I see.
Okay, I have a question.
Okay, yeah, great.
Right. This probably may be relevant because of the background of the facilitator, but it's related to climate change in some way somehow. So, I would want to know from him what we know that as we highlight the problems of climate change, we suggest solutions. So one of the things is to continue to review the solutions as well, whether they are working or whether they are also having impact on health as well. So one of the things I know about climate change, especially in relation to food security or food insecurity, I should say, is the advent of genetically engineered food. So I would want to find out from him, is there any research going on, or if the research is going on, what's the direction of research in terms of genetically modified food and then its effect on the biology of certain gastroenterology conditions like celiac disease, like inflammatory bowel disease, and those things? Is there any highlight? Is there any direction that some research is really pointing to? That's the question I would want to ask him.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm an expert on this, but I know something about it. I mean, one of the main companies which is involved in producing genetically modified crops would be Monsanto. And they've had a slightly checkered career path with this, I would say, in favor of genetically modifying foods would be that we may be able to breed species of crops that are more heat resistant and more drought tolerant and more resistant to infections with pests, as opposed to having to use insecticides and so on. So those are all good things, and I think people can get into that. Against it is the concern about biodiversity loss, that if you produce a crop, if we lose biodiversity, we run the risk of a infection, a plant infection, producing catastrophic changes in crops and food security. And that's one of the concerns about this. And my own country, Ireland, which was reliant on one crop at one point, experienced an absolutely devastating famine when that crop failed. So I guess the point is, I think there is a role for genetically engineered crops. I'm not an expert on it, but there are schools of thought on it. With regard to celiac disease, I'm not so sure about celiac. There's it's very fashionable in the West, I'm not sure about Ghana, to have gluten intolerance as opposed to celiac disease. So people who feel that they get bloating and discomfort and so on exposure to gluten. And there's been some suggestion that that is increasing, possibly as a result of changes in the genetic makeup of gliadin. But it remains, I think, a little speculative. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jolord, for the question. Thanks, Des, for the response. Next is Joel. Joel Agorian, your hand is up. Please unmute yourself and then ask your question or make your submission.
All right, good evening. Prof. Les, thank you for the presentation. I wanted to find out, for a country like Ghana that doesn't seem to have contributed much to this climate change problem we are dealing with, yet we are going to suffer most of the scorn of the emergency. What would you advise advocates to do? Should we push for our governments to prepare for the consequences, or should we join the global call for, decrease in carbon emissions? Take northern Ghana for example. We have the incidence of annual flooding when the dams are open. Should we be more concerned about what can be done to prevent these floods? It's becoming a national issue. Little rainfall and the entire country gets flooded. Are those things that we should be more concerned, asking our governments to put in place structures to protect people from these kind of disasters, or should we rather push energy into the call for decrease in carbon emissions? And then my second one is, I noticed that there's a seminar coming up next week on the intersection between climate and health, climate change and health, by your faculty, and my good friend, Professor Japong, is on the panel. What is the impact of this climate change on mental health, and how does our mental health also help us to relate in terms of making changes to dealing with the emergence of climate change in our countries and globally? Thank you.
Great, thank you, Joel, for those really excellent questions. So I think your first one was going back to the slides that I showed you, which is that Ghana hasn't created this problem, but you are going to be on the receiving end of the effects of it. I think that's what you were talking about. And then you asked, well, what should we do? Should we be lobbying for mitigation, as it's called, to reduce carbon globally, or should we be trying to adapt to it? Joel, I think the strategy would be threefold. The first thing is I would create an adaptation strategy. An adaptation means you're not trying to prevent climate change, you're trying to prevent the worst effects of it. So your question about the dams, for example, would fall into that. The second strategy is mitigation, that you reduce carbon output. But you're not, Ghana per capita output is near zero. It's 500 kilograms per person per year. Canada is 17.5 thousand kilograms per person per year. So I don't know what you're supposed to, you can't go from almost nothing to nothing. I mean, it's not possible. So Joel, I really think the strategy which applies for Ghana is the one which many countries are calling for, which is massive financial transfers from wealthy countries who have created this problem to countries which have not created the problem in order to help them adapt and mitigate the issue. So, for example, in northern Ghana, a tree which is standing on its own in a field has really no value until it's cut down. And when it's cut down and turned into charcoal, it has value. But we don't value it for the fact that it sequesters carbon dioxide and produces oxygen and keeps the environment cool. So we need to rethink about our financial models. And I absolutely believe, and so does I think the United Nations, that there needs to be massive transfer of funds from countries which have the money to countries which don't, in order to help them adapt to and repair ecosystems. And I think that's where it needs to go. I don't think mitigation is an issue for you. I do think, from what I saw briefly of the villages driving through northern Ghana, that moving to cleaner air and cleaner sources of cooking materials would be critically important, and that can be done in a greener way, given your sunlight and the rest of it. So I think there's a lot that can be done, but I don't think you produce this. I don't think you're guilty of it, and I think you need help adapting to what's going to happen and restoring your environment.
Yeah, Des?
Yeah.
Yeah, the second part of his question was on the effects on mental health.
Oh, yes. So yes, Joel, there's a lot of literature on that. I mean, and you can consider it under three categories, really. One is acute, chronic, and the third one is PTSD. So there's a high incidence of PTSD in populations which experience climate-related events. So, for example, after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, a large numbers of people were diagnosed with PTSD. Acute anxiety around climate events, we can all understand, but there's another one, which is a chronic level of anxiety, especially in younger people, which has got the name, it's called eco-anxiety. And there's quite a lot of literature about this and how it's affecting a younger generation who can clearly see what's happening to the climate, and they hear about it all the time, but they don't feel in any position to be able to do anything about it. So the mental health issues are a major issue, and you'll find a lot of literature on it if you dive into it. Thanks, Dominic. And thanks, Joe.
Great. Next is Emmanuel Wezena. Please unmute yourself and go ahead. Hi,
all right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Doc. I just want to find out how ecosystem services or healthy ecosystems could help improve public health in the midst of the ravaging impacts of climate change in Ghana. I don't know if you got that clear or not.
So Emmanuel, the sound broke up a little bit, but I think you said, how could restoring healthy ecosystems help with the public health challenges of climate? Is that what you said?
Yes, please.
Okay. So again, Emmanuel, there is again very extensive work on this. That when you restore green spaces in towns and cities, for example, It's associated with lower temperature in those areas, less heat extremes. It's associated with better mental health outcomes, and it increases biodiversity as well. With regard to northern Ghana, I mean, one of the things that struck me about it, and again, I know very little about it, having visited once briefly, is the relative scarcity of the trees compared to what I thought was there before. And when you restore forests, you change local temperature, local precipitation, you decrease runoff of soil into the rivers and lakes, and you increase the biodiversity as well. So quite an extensive literature on this, on how restoring ecosystems can help. And of course, every time you put something back, a tree back in or a forest back in, those are they do sequester carbon. And it is the source of renewable energies like biomass, although there is controversy about that as well. So I think the arguments can be made very strongly for both mental and physical health to restore ecosystems when at all possible.
Great, Des. So I just saw someone unmuted.
There's one question in the chat box I see from Selorm. Shall I read that, Dominic?
Yes, please, go ahead, Prof.
So Selorm, there's this belief among certain fanatic Christian religious bodies, especially end-time prophetics, that climate change is just a hoax. Since Ghana is a Christian community in majority, what do we tell our population? Well, you know, Selorm, I mean, I'd always be respectful of people's beliefs, but I certainly don't believe that climate change is a hoax. And I'm in touch most days, I would say, with people from one end of the world to the other, including the Pacific and the Arctic and so on, in my capacity with the World Gastroenterology Organization. And both the anecdotal evidence from places like the Arctic or the Pacific is very clear that people are experiencing changes in their local climate, just as you reported in the survey. But leaving anecdotes aside, the scientific evidence is no longer in dispute. The last report of the International Panel on Climate Change a couple of weeks ago removed any doubt about it. They were criticized formally for leaving some doubt that it was happening. In the last IPCC report, they are explicit. It is happening and it is caused by humans. There's no longer any doubt about that. With regard to people who don't choose to believe that, okay, I'd say, listen, fair enough, carry on. I suppose it'd be a bit like having a conversation with somebody who doesn't believe in COVID vaccines. I mean, the science is convincing that COVID vaccines work. You may choose not to believe that, and I respect your opinion, but I won't agree with you.
Right, Des. Dr. Siedu has his hand up. Please go ahead with your submission.
You're on mute, Dr. Siedu.
Yes, I've asked Dr. Siedu to unmute himself. Please go ahead.
I think maybe we lost Dr. Siedu. Nope.
Okay. Hello. Yeah. Sorry. I had some issues trying to unlock. So my response first goes to Selom. I don't know. It might be an opinion held by some Christian sect, but I don't think it's a major belief held in Ghana. So I think that shouldn't really affect our fight against climate change. Furthermore, I think the world is moving into a more liberal state where people can choose to do whatever they want to do. So if we on one part are trying to tell people to do whatever they want to do, and another part we are trying to get these people, the other people, other side to also try and work in order to improve issues of climate? How are we going to achieve that balance? The second question is also from the northern part of Ghana. I realize that the major source of income for these people is usually from charcoal, which is gotten from cutting down trees.
Yeah.
So what is our plan? What are we aiming at? Maybe finding an alternative source of income or generation for these people, or what do you seek to do? Okay, thank you.
Dr. Sidu, thank you. I heard the second part of your question, but I didn't hear the first part. So Dominic, what was the first part of the question? It's just the sound broke up a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was in response to Selom's question about those who think climate change is a horse. He was responding that he doesn't think it's a widely held view. It's probably within a set of the country, not something that is widely held. Then
Okay.
he went ahead with the second one, which you got.
Yeah, I got that. So Dr. Sidu, thank you. I think your question was about chopping down trees for charcoal and to gain some income. And I certainly saw that in the villages that people were selling charcoal all along the road. And I gather that's just one of the few ways that people can earn some income. But, you know, is it really any different than us digging up coal or hauling out oil? I mean, we're both destroying, burning fossil fuels and releasing carbon. And, you know, you could argue that the people who are dependent on coal or oil in wealthy countries, we will also have to find an alternative source of income for them. And so the challenge that humans face is truly massive. And to transition from a carbon-based economy to one that's green and not producing carbon dioxide is a revolution. And people are coming up with completely different economic models as to how that can be done. But look, I understand. I agree with you. I understand. I mean, if somebody has a family and kids, and the only thing they can do is chop down a tree and sell the charcoal, what else can they do? So we have to create alternative economic pathways for those people. I think for Ghana, the case is compelling. You didn't create this problem. Your carbon output's almost zero. You didn't do it. We did it. And I think the wealthy countries, which have built their wealth over the last 50, 100 years from carbon fuels, have got a debt to pay. And it will include bringing in, I think, sustainable economies for countries like Ghana.
Great.
Yes. Then I think there was a part, hello?
Yeah, Dr. Sidu, go ahead.
Yes, yeah, I think that was a part of the question where I wanted to find out. I said, so we are moving, I mean, the world is now moving to a very liberal state where people can decide to do whatever they want to do. So how do you expect to this fight to succeed if it might get to a point where we are unable to whip everyone in to help in this fight? Because I think sometimes with simple legislation, things like this might be able to succeed. But if people have a choice to do whatever they want to do and decide if they think a tree is important or not, how do you expect to achieve this fight?
Yeah, well, listen, okay, I'll tell you what I really think, which is I think at the moment we're not winning the fight. We're not even in the fight. And there was a release of documents this morning through Greenpeace, the lobbying from countries all over the world with regard to the climate meeting coming up in Glasgow, trying to reduce the recommendations from that. So I don't think we're there yet. So what's going to happen is that things are going to get worse. And at some point in the affairs of humans, we begin to straighten up and cooperate and get our act together. But we're not at that point. What you can do individually, there's nothing that any of us can do. But what we can do collectively, and that's why I'm so interested in your group in Northern Ghana, is that you can get your voice out there and you can make noise and you can get it known And Dominic and Kelly and I and a few others are going to get together the next week or two to look at that survey and see what we can do. I mean, I wouldn't underestimate how important it would be for a group like your network in Northern Ghana to state very clearly that you're already feeling the effects of climate change, if indeed you are, and to push that for that change to occur. I mean, we all know that we have to change, but governments, for many reasons, are reluctant to change. What we have to do is move them to that position where they're beginning to address the problems. And these are huge problems, including how do we transfer funds from rich countries to lower income countries in order to support different economies and different lifestyles. This is a real big challenge, and we're late in the game, because these climate systems, once you activate them, you can't turn them off. I mean, and you know, Dr. Cito, people say 1.1 degrees, okay, 1.5 degrees, okay. It really isn't. I mean, at 1 degree, 1.2 degrees above pre-industrial, the Arctic ice is fast disappearing. So these are really arbitrary levels, and I think we need to get on with it. I think we all have a role to play, and I think we need to be vocal about it. So I think it's great that Dr. Akatiba and Ghana Medical Hub and your health system are beginning to think about engaging on this, and we should try and get your perspective out as quickly as we can.
Great, Des. Thank you. So we can take the last question or comment, and then we draw the curtains on this brilliant presentation. So if there's any such, kindly put up your hand, and then we'll unmute you to talk. As well, I don't see any question in the chat box. It was a thank you from Selom following his initial question.
Well, and thank you, Dominic, and thanks everyone who logged in. It's been a real pleasure and an honor to have a chance to talk to you. I hope it was useful, and I hope it's the start of a conversation which will continue.
Yeah, sure. Kelly, sound is up.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Des, I just wanted to comment to say thank you so much for this really, really interesting conversation and dialogue, and this presentation, which really shows a full spectrum view of the issue and the ways that it has implications all around the world, and especially in Northern Ghana. GMH, we've been working in Northern Ghana for 10 years, and in those 10 years, we've seen a dramatic change in how the rainy season and dry seasons are, and their level of unpredictability, and it has really major implications that we've seen. So I was really excited to have your expertise and leadership with us today to lead us into this discussion, and I'm really excited to see where GMH can take this from here and work with local public health professionals and health workers to continue to advocate and move the community along. I know I'll be here in Canada with you, looking to see what we can do from our side over here as well in the West. But yeah, thank you very, very much. And thank you to everyone today for participating in this presentation and discussion. Thank you, Dominic, for hosting as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly, for those kind words. Listen, I think you've got a unique network. I know several places around the world. I don't know of a network with 40 frontline physicians, scientists, nurses, and physios like you have here. So this is quite important, and I think that we could play a role in making sure that the story from Ghana and from West Africa is told to as wide as a population as possible. Thanks, Dominic. Great work.
Thanks, Des, and thanks for making time to do this presentation. I know a lot went into it. We're so much grateful for your time. And thanks as well to all the participants for making time to join us this week in this very important discourse on climate change and its impact on health. So I don't see any comments. No hand is up as well. So just in conclusion, I would say that climate change is real, and we need to all get our acts together to support this fight towards making the world a better place. As usual, we sign off by saying that COVID is real, COVID is there, the vaccines are available. Please get a jab and do observe the various protocols, and keep safe. God bless. Bye-bye to everyone.
Bye. Take care. Thank you.
Hello.